Welcome in to a Wednesday edition of the Inside the Tigers podcast. I'm Harrison Valentine. Glad you're with us. We're just a couple of days away from SEC Media Days in Hoover, which means college football is right around the corner. And who better to preview it all with than ESPN senior college football writer Adam Rittenberg. Adam, thanks for coming on, man.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So it's been a fairly quiet offseason in the SEC, in particular for LSU. I know for someone working in the media business, that might not be ideal, but in most cases, no news is good news for these programs, especially in the Southeastern Conference. I want to start with Ed Orgeron and the Tigers because I know a lot of people are probably getting tired of seeing LSU always in the preseason top 10, but I feel like if there's any year for them to be warranted of that ranking, I think it's this year. I mean, they returned almost everybody from last season, and they have somewhat of a favorable schedule, and I say that in relative terms, but Georgia rotates off, Vanderbilt rotates on, Florida, Auburn, A&M all have to come to Baton Rouge this year. What's the ceiling, Adam, in your eyes, for the LSU Tigers in 2019?
Yeah, I think there's certain momentum. So I think the ceiling can be a little higher realistically going into this year, for some of those reasons. And then you just look at the personnel. Dave Aranda is regarded, as you know, as one of the best defensive coordinators in college football. And I don't know if he's had a unit that's as deep and as talented as the one he'll have this year. So I think you're going to see what he can do from a full schematic potential after maybe being a little bit limited in certain areas in previous years. And then you look at the offense, and that's certainly been the area where LSU has not achieved nearly to its talent level. But I think there's an opportunity this year with the returning starter in Joe Burrow, with obviously talent at receiver and at running back, some returning pieces at the offensive line, and at least the promises of some changes from a scheme standpoint for them to take a step forward offensively. So, I think it's a team that if they can continue the way they played at the end of last year and take advantage of their home field, they're going to be a team that should be in the mix in the SEC West. Now, they got to go to Alabama, which doesn't have a very tough schedule overall. But, I think LSU should be that team or one of the teams that challenges Alabama in the SEC West.
And then off the field, LSU hires Scott Woodward as the new AD. I saw you wrote a piece on the hire for ESPN, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts. It's gained unanimous approval from the locals down here in Baton Rouge, which is very rare for anything to be unanimously approved. If you could describe the impact of this hire in one or two words, what would it be? And then obviously you can expound upon it after.
Well, I think he's a stabilizing force for LSU, an athletic director who's obviously been at other programs and has done great things, not just from hiring coaches, but I think in elevating those programs. And LSU is a program that certainly has prestige in football, but it's had some financial issues. It's had some behind the scenes chaos at times, and I think needs somebody that obviously loves the school, that knows the school, that's going to connect with the important people around the school, because politically it's a challenging environment at LSU, just as it was for Scott at Texas A&M. So he's not only used to that environment, but he also knows LSU about as well as anyone. So yeah, I think it's a hire that should resonate with people there. Not just, he's going to hire a great football coach the next time around, but he's going to help the program right now take steps forward and support Ed Orgeron. I think there was so much conversation when he got the job of, he's going to go hire Jimbo Fisher. But that's that's not good. That means LSU football is not achieving. I don't think that's what Scott Woodward wants. So he wants Ed Orgeron to succeed. He wants LSU to be winning the SEC again. And I think his presence should, in theory, help them get closer to that goal.
So I want to switch gears off of LSU and talk a little college football as a whole and do something fun. I'm going to give you a couple of teams, and you're just going to say whether you're buying them in 2019 or selling them in 2019, and then a quick explanation as to why after. Now, I'm not going to give you Alabama or Clemson or any of the favorites. I'm going to give you some teams who are on the border of being college football playoff contenders. Sound good?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so my first one is Texas. Are you buying or selling the Longhorns as a legitimate contender in 2019?
Ooh, it's a tough one. I'm probably selling just because they lose so much on defense, and I still think Oklahoma's a step ahead of them overall. But, their offense should be really dynamic, with Sam Ehlinger at quarterback, and they have receivers, they have running backs. Offensive line's taking a step forward under Herb Hand, but they lose, I think, 9 starters on defense and, pretty much their entire front seven. I don't think that's going to be good enough for them to get all the way to the playoff this year.
Yeah, I think that week 2 game with LSU is LSU's biggest game on their schedule. I mean, if they beat Texas, it's kind of smooth sailing after that until Tuscaloosa. So it'll be interesting to see how those two match up on ABC with Kirk Herbstreit and all that. My next one is Oregon. Are you selling or are you buying the Ducks as a legitimate team in 2019?
You know, another tough one. I mean, I could give you a better answer after week 1, but I think Oregon's got certain things that make me really excited about them. Quarterback, certainly, and Justin Herbert. I think their offensive line, what Mario Cristobal has done with that group in a couple of years has been really impressive. Your receivers are a question mark. They dropped a lot of passes last year. They lost Dylan Mitchell, who is their go-to guy on third down. But they have a lot of young players who are exciting. So, I think their defense is going to be pretty good under Addy Avalos, who's a really good hire coming over from Boise State. Can they get all the way to the playoffs? I probably not. But they're certainly a team to watch in the Pac-12 and maybe the favorite in that conference coming into the year.
And then finally, in Dan Mullen's second year, is Florida a true contender for the playoff in your eyes in 2019?
Yeah, I think they are. I mean, if the trajectory continues on offense, there's no reason why they shouldn't be, because you just saw that they were a much more competent team last year in just year 1. And just the way that people talk about their offense, specifically their quarterback, Felipe Franks, both inside and outside the program, the whole tenor has changed about him. And that's encouraging, because Florida defensively, if they can stay healthy, they're going to be one of the better defenses in the SEC. They have been one of the better defenses in the SEC. They've just been quite a bit behind on offense and at quarterback. So they have to certainly close the gap with Georgia. Georgia's handled them well the last couple of years, and that's going to be a game to watch. But I think that they are a team that if everything kind of stays on the course that it is right now, they will be in the playoff mix.
One or two more before we let you go. We're on with Adam Rittenberg of ESPN. Alabama is obviously the benchmark and the clear favorite in the SEC. Does Georgia, or even anyone for that matter, have a chance at beating them this season with Tua and Judy and all those guys back?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I mean, I think if you watched Alabama defensively at the end of last year, there were certainly some things that were exposed, not just by Clemson in the national title game, but by Georgia, in the SEC title game and in Oklahoma in the semifinal. So I think there's a little bit of a blueprint about how to attack Alabama. And, and Tua certainly was not 100% at the end of last year, but I think, showed some things that defenses can, maybe exploit. Seemed to go for the home run ball a lot, and they do that again. They have a lot of changes on their coaching staff again. That's hard to survive year after year, even if you have the greatest head coach of the modern era, and Nick Saban. So I don't think that it's just Alabama and a huge gulf with everybody else. I think Georgia's shown that they're right there. They could have beaten Alabama in the national title game a couple of years ago. They could have beaten Alabama easily in the SEC championship last year. So, but I think there's an urgency now, because if Georgia doesn't get it done and say Florida, beats them this year and kind of moves ahead of them, I think there's certainly going to be more angst for Kirby Smart in Athens. And then in the West, I think you look at 3 teams in LSU and A&M and Auburn that all have areas of their team that are good enough to match up with Alabama. It's just whether they're good enough as whole teams to do so. A&M, I think, of the 3, having the toughest road just because their overall schedule is brutal.
And then finally, as we move through talking season and into SEC Media Days, is there a storyline or a question that you're most looking forward to see get answered when the season kicks off?
Well, just seeing the roster of players for SEC Media Day, I was struck by the number of quarterbacks, which is great to see so many quarterbacks represented there. And I'm always interested to see if that area in the SEC, how it shakes out. I mean, Alabama has certainly taken steps forward from an offensive standpoint the last couple of years, so they're not relying just on their defense to win national titles. You've seen A&M under Jimbo Fisher be better offensively last year. Florida, as I mentioned, where's Georgia go? Georgia has an experienced quarterback at Jake Fromm, but they've had some changes on their staff, and are they going to be throwing the ball more? So I think the blueprint in the SEC how to win is fairly clear, but also changing in the sense that you can't just be an elite defense and hope to get by offensively. It's how creative and what type of approach you're going to take on that side of the ball, especially with your quarterback.
That's Adam Rittenberg. You can follow him on Twitter at ESPN. Rittenberg, Adam, we appreciate the time today.
Oh, you bet. Thanks for having me on.
This has been the Inside the Tigers podcast, keeping our eyes on the Tigers 24/7.